Hello, how is everyone doing? It's the 12th of November. I'm going to take a look at Litecoin. A month ago, on the 13th of October, it was Litecoin's 13th birthday since it's launched. It's the longest running blockchain with 100% uptime, which is a pretty big deal achievement. And this month, of course, we've got the new Litecoin ETF. So Litecoin is one of those OG coins that everybody remembers. And if you were trading way back when in 2017, let's take a look at this Litecoin chart. Way back when in 2017, especially if you were in the States, where if you wanted to trade very many altcoins, you were in really dodgy offshore exchanges, but most people were trading on Coinbase, and by far Litecoin was the biggest winner on Coinbase. And I will never forget the November 2017 when Litecoin, in about 5 or 6 weeks went from 50 to 400 in like a spectacular run. And Litecoin is one of those coins that spends ages going sideways and building a little bit of a base. But one thing that happens with these, especially with these weekly moving averages, when you kind of break out and you get a hold, you get a really good swing. We went from 17 to 400, $70 to 400 at the end of 2020. Now, we haven't really had much of an altcoin alt season, if you like, this year, this swing or this cycle. I'm not sure that we're going to. I know Wintermute keep telling us how no new money is coming into crypto. So basically, it's the same bathwater sloshing around, and I think you have to be quite careful with what you pick. But for me, Litecoin is one of those AG coins that I really do think has potential to be higher. There's an awful lot of stories about BlackRock buying Litecoin and so on. But if you look at what people do with Litecoin, it's still a pretty important asset. It's probably the number one crypto for real world payments. If you look at the largest payment processor, which is BitPay, it's more than a third of all of their transactions. If you look at Fidelity Digital Assets, they only offer 3 and Litecoin is one of them. On PayPal, they only offer 4 and Litecoin is one of them. So if we do get some renewed interest, especially with the ETF coming back into Litecoin, and the fact that it is a payment coin, which when in a year when not much has really outperformed except privacy coins and Bitcoin and ETH, and most altcoins have been pretty dismal, payment coins have been kind of stable in the middle, and Litecoin I think is one of the more interesting one of them. Charlie Lee, who's the creator, is still pretty involved with Litecoin. So I see this sideways distribution as pretty interesting. I'm always interested when, especially, see how these weekly moving averages, we had bearish moving averages basically since 2022, and this was the awful Terra Luna FTX crash low here, and unlike everything else, Bitcoin, ETH, everything else had this huge blowout explosion after that higher. And Litecoin, it hasn't happened for, and yet it still has really good real world uses. It's fast and cheap. And so I see this distribution, and I like how we've got this bullish cross of all of these weekly moving averages, the 20 now above, the 50 above, and this 200 weekly moving average, which was previously really good support here and here in early 2022, and then became resistance in 2023 and 2024. Now we're doing this dance. And I said before, when you draw an important support and resistance level, very often the first time you'll come into it, it'll be resistance, and then you'll go forward through it a few times, and then the bullish side is when you find support from it, and that's you're going up again. And I kind of feel like that's how we're looking here in Litecoin with this weekly support. So we basically, since the summer of 24, We've been in this range with the lows around 50 and the highs around 150, and 100 therefore is the middle of this price range exactly. And the price that we are at tonight, and looking to see if we can try and find some support here, this kind of pivot level in the middle is 100. I'm definitely a fan of buying dips in Litecoin, and not just for this reason of this kind of bullish cross setting up with these moving averages, which makes me think that this kind of compression consolidation is setting up a big break to the upside. And if we get out of this 150 kind of highs zone, I think that we could make another run and a third touch up to 4. I wouldn't be surprised, just because it just has such a good name and such good real use in Litecoin. So if we take a look at Litecoin and compared to a couple of others, like, do we want to buy Litecoin instead of, say, ETH? Because ETH has been massively outperforming. And if we take a look at Litecoin against ETH, I see that we've made this really nice double bottom here. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? A swing failure, false breakdown. We should at least then get back to the high of this range if we continue higher from here in Litecoin against ETH. So for me, this looks pretty good. If I look at Litecoin against Bitcoin, then I see a similar kind of pattern. Pretty nice swing failure, false breakdowns. If we can break the highs of this sideways range that we've basically been in since the summer, I think that we have a really nice run onto the upside. 0.0015 and this swing high from the start of the year is going to be the key level I would like to see us take out if we're going to have a big run in Litecoin against Bitcoin. But even some of the others, if we can look at Litecoin against Ripple, for example, which has been massively outperforming. And when I look at this, remember, this is a weekly chart. This says to me, God, this is pretty stable. We are making a pretty decent base here, Litecoin against Ripple, which has had, again, a really nice run, and Litecoin hasn't yet. And I look at this bullish cross here of setting up with the weekly moving averages in Litecoin against Ripple, and I think, this looks pretty interesting. Let's see if we can find support here. And as I look at this tonight, we are exactly back testing this weekly 50 moving average. So I'm looking at this on lower time frames, saying, are we trying to find some support here, and could we see a swing higher? And like everything else, we had this really nasty shakeout on the 10th of October, and since then everything has just been trying to find its balance, and we've seen some compression, and we kind of need to break out from this. This is how I see Litecoin against Ripple, but it's certainly holding up. But it hasn't had the big price run yet that Ripple has had. And so I'm kind of looking at, when you think at how payment and stable coins and everything else has have, because you can use this, I'm pretty interested in Litecoin. And I think buying it, if we can hold against 100, I'm not ruling out that, we aren't going to have a nasty moment and we could still have another dip lower. I'm not piling in yet with any leverage in Litecoin. But if we look at let's go back to Litecoin against the dollar. I think, for a lot of people, Litecoin see it as a bit of a dinosaur joke. But because it has these real world uses, and let's face it, Ripple is, of course, a payment system, but Litecoin is different. And I kind of like this one. I definitely like this bullish cross of these weekly moving averages. And I would love to see this break out above 125. We're on our way to retest the highs. I'm not saying this will be a channel. I'd like to see this break out higher from here. But I think potentially this is setting up. And that's why I like